I will give you the treasures of darkness and the riches hidden in secret places, so that you may know that I am the Lord, the God of Israel, who calls you by name. Isaiah 45, verse 3. In the spring of 2019, I was diagnosed with a fatal neurodegenerative disease called corticobasal syndrome. It's a nastier cousin of Parkinson's disease, one that moves faster and for which there is no treatment. On the morning I checked myself into the emergency department at Penn Hospital, I could barely walk, even with my wife's help. It was a relief to finally sink into a wheelchair once I got inside. The next time I walked down that hallway, it took 3 physical therapists to hold me upright. I don't remember much of what the physician who gave me my diagnosis said, because when my wife, who's also a doctor, began to quietly weep, I sort of went out of body. After he'd gone, I said, "So this is something people die of?" She nodded as she held me, and we cried together. My wife and I had a lot of conversations I didn't want to have about life support and feeding tubes and how long before the medication stopped working. We figured I probably had 3 to 5 years. I began to make preparations. I started letters to be given to my 2 daughters and my goddaughter when they turned 21. I started a list of happy memories to be read to me as my cognitive loss got worse. My wife and I drew up my advanced directive, listing the things I didn't want: feeding tubes, CPR. I made a list of objects I wanted with me in the room where I died. My wife and children put in new railings in my house, handlebars in the bathroom. Our pastor said the church could build a wheelchair ramp for our house. I gave away artwork. I gave away file boxes full of books. I prayed a lot. I read books about death and dying, which I've been doing for years anyway because I'm a hospice chaplain. Now, one of the reasons I love being a hospice chaplain is that no one ever asks me to pray for a miraculous cure. My patients know they are dying, and most of them are ready. So my job is just to land the plane well. I think the experience of ministering to the dying is one of the main reasons I was able to remain as calm and focused as I was in the weeks after my diagnosis. In fact, I was kind of glad I didn't have something like cancer that I would be expected to fight. You hear so many stories about brave people overcoming the odds and fighting their way back to health. Maybe you know some of those people. Maybe you are some of those people. And I knew that wasn't me. I knew I didn't have it in me to fight, that I would rather prepare to die well than fight to stay alive. In fact, the end stage of corticobasal degeneration is so horrifying, I was comforted to learn that by the time I got there, physician-assisted suicide would be legal in New Jersey. At the same time, an interesting thing began to happen. Learning how to take care of myself and preserve what functioning I had while I could, I found myself spending more time in the right here and right now than I ever had before. I watched myself move in slow motion. Bradykinesia is the medical term. I committed to memory the names of every nurse, aide, therapist, physician, and specialist with whom I came into contact. I noticed how my body felt, how it acted, how it worked, and how it didn't work. I also began wrestling with a passage from 1 Peter, in which the writer addresses the nascent Jesus movement as people who may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Now that sounds beautiful, doesn't it? But I realized I had no idea what it means or feels like to be called out of darkness and into the light. But I think I do now, at least with respect to myself. I have come to believe that the darkness is most of what goes on in my head, playing and replaying resentful memories, useless recriminations, alternative histories, what-ifs and if-onlys, revenge scenarios, sexual fantasies, endless loops upon loops that keep me in my head and out of touch with whatever is happening outside my head. Conversely, I have come to believe that the wonderful light is what exists on the other side of my eyeballs. The people, places, activities, and situations in which I am actually placed. Since my diagnosis, I've spent considerably less time in the darkness inside my head and a lot more time in the wonderful light. I am more in touch with my own life as I am living it. It makes me wonder how much life I missed while hanging out in the darkness inside my head. There must have been a lot more life I could have lived in front of my eyeballs than I have lived behind them. Another advantage of the wonderful light is the way it has encouraged me to cultivate the curiosity about things that the Buddhist writers are always recommending. What's it like to have someone stand with you in the bathroom because you're a fall risk? What's it like to eat French toast with your fingers in front of other people because only one of your hands works? What's it like to realize you are never going to be a grandfather or a father of the bride or see your goddaughter confirmed? What's it like to lose the ability to type, to play musical instruments? What's it like when people honk at you because you're not hobbling fast enough? What's it like to have someone else wash your backside in a shower chair? Of course, all these things would have been happening to me whether I were living in the darkness in my head or in the wonderful light. But in the light, there were things I was learning about and learning from, rather than merely things that were happening to me. This is a choice we all make, moment by moment, to stay present or to check out, to stand the ground of our awareness or retreat into self-distraction. We can be victims of events or we can be students of them. Now, the temptation to retreat sometimes to some inner happy place can be very strong, and not just for me. But I've heard so many people, friends, patients' families, express gratitude for the immediacy, the intensity of presence they've experienced in the shadow of death. Few things can help us to be here now, like knowing we won't be here much longer. So I'm grateful for the way my illness has evicted me from my inner darkness and thrust me into the outer light, where my life has a reality and immediacy it has only rarely had in the past. This is not to say, of course, that I never sneak back into my inner darkness from time to time. Of course I do. But I don't live there any longer. I do think a lot about dying and pain and debility, but those thoughts are about real things. The family I worry about and dread to leave are real. The friends who come to visit me are real. The medication-induced constipation is real. It's all real. Maybe this is why Jesus said, "I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly." Not more easily, not more conveniently, certainly not more painlessly. Just more abundantly, more life, uncensored life, the whole dirty ball of wax. When I first came home from the hospital after being diagnosed, my wife gave me a tour of the modifications she had made to the house in anticipation of my return. As I sat in the new shower chair, holding onto the newly installed grab bar, she pointed out how the shower doors had been replaced with a curtain. Now this curtain, she said, is the part that's really going to drive you crazy. I stared at her for a moment, and then I began to laugh. "Oh, I see," I exclaimed. "So this is the part that is going to drive me crazy. I was wondering what the really annoying part was going to be. At last, the other shoe has dropped." We collapsed in laughter, giggling helplessly for a long time. When my time comes, I hope I am ready. At peace with God and my fellow creatures, I pray I can go calmly and steadily into the great mystery. But one thing became clear in that damp shower stall. I am not yet ready to go, and my wife is not yet ready to lose me. About 2 months after I was discharged from the hospital, I pushed my walker up the handicapped ramp at my bank and discovered that the ramp ends in a flight of stairs. So I folded up the walker like a beach chair and tucked it under my arm and grabbed hold of the railing and climbed the stairs. I heard a man's voice call out from the sidewalk, "They took you a walk, but they didn't take you a step. You look like you're going to throw that thing in the Olympics." I did keep exercising. I did my physical therapy. I resumed practicing the accordion and even started tentatively doing some yoga. As a sort of a Hail Mary, the doctors had given me a drug used to treat Parkinson's. And to everyone's surprise, It helped. Against all expectations, I started getting better. Soon the wheelchair was stored away in the basement, then the walker. I resumed walking a mile to church and a mile back for morning prayer on weekdays. I resumed mowing the lawn, doing the grocery shopping, walking the dog. I got my driver's license back. In October, my neurologist finally changed my diagnosis to Parkinson's disease. And now, of course, the gift that keeps on taking, as Michael J. Fox calls it, is not ordinarily something to turn cartwheels about. But in my case, it was definitely good news. You wouldn't have known it, though, from the way I responded to my unfortunate doctor's first intimation that I may not be dying anytime soon. "Don't mess with me," I told the poor man. See, I had worked very hard to reconfigure my life to that of a dying person, and while the prospect of a near-normal lifespan was exhilarating, it was also disorienting. I had quit my job. I had broken the grim news to family and friends. I had spent many hours over several months steadying myself, reading, meditating, and praying, preparing not to be here anymore. It was a big adjustment. I actually found myself occasionally missing those first awful days when I knew, more or less, exactly what was going to happen. "If you live in the dark a long time and the sun comes out," wrote memoirist Mary Karr, "you do not cross into it whistling." But I know I have more to be grateful for than I have time to list. To name just one thing, though, I'm grateful for what the experience has taught me about myself, that I am strong, that I can apply myself, that I am a fighter. In fact, I'm now taking a boxing-based exercise class for people with Parkinson's. I'm grateful that though they took my walk, they didn't take my step. These, then, are the treasures of darkness, the riches hidden in secret places that I brought with me when God called me out into the wonderful light. The knowledge that, as C.S. Lewis put it, it is only in the present moment in which freedom and actuality are offered to human beings. The knowledge that wherever we are and whenever it is, this is the house of God. Here is the gate of heaven. Now is the acceptable time. And today is the day of salvation.